You say that the new intersectional left operates like a runaway train. Conceding any ground to the left will not cause it to stop roaring forward. And yet that continually over the last few decades has been exactly what the right has done. Concede ground, concede ground.
No, that's exactly what I've argued. When are you going to stop? I mean, I turn on Fox News, I see black gays, I see, lesbians arguing for conservative transgendered rights. I mean, how far are you going to go to cede ground to the other side? This is the late coming left. They take over what the leftist positions were 10 years ago or 20 years ago, and they call it conservatism. And they keep doing this. But of course, you're ceding ground all along the way. So the question is, when are you going to stop? And when are you going to develop a spine?
What's the assumption in the response from the right there? Why assume that appeasement is going to work? Or do you think that they're genuinely just sympathetic to the left beneath it all?
I think some are, in fact, sympathetic to the left because they grew up and they were acculturated, by the left. They went to Ivy League schools, and I have 5 kids. They're all adults, and most of them are leftist. And they think I'm just crazy. And I think that the conservative movement simply represents a more moderate left, but does not want to recognize, the fact that it has nothing in common with the conservatism of the 1950s, except for intolerance. They remained equally more intolerant or become more intolerant than they were back then. So I think that's part of it. Another part, I think, of why they have become this way is they want mainstream acceptability. They don't want you to call them racist. I hear these people on TV, these conservatives, I'm not a racist, am I? You got a black person to say that you're not a racist. You feel better. These people really have no spine. There's no reason to say this. Or, they lie about the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement was all good, and suddenly things became bad around 2005 or 2006. Things have been going in this direction a long time, I argue in my books. And to say that it was okay until 5 or 10 years ago, I think is to mistake the problem.
What do you think is the fundamental mistake that has been made by the right here at the outset?
I think one mistake is the intolerance and the obsessive anti-communism that I remember just sort of reading past when I used to read National Review in the 1960s or 70s. These were good writers, but, why are they so obsessed? Of course, many were recovering communists who became fanatical anti-communists, but remained as totalitarian as they were before. I think that's part of the problem. And they start purging people from the beginning. I was purged, but they started purging people back in the 1950s, some of whom I knew because they opposed their foreign policy or they weren't anti-communist enough or something like that. So the intolerance is in their blood. And the neoconservatives are far more fanatical and far more paranoid than the first generation were. So I think this is a problem. Then they just decided they were going to move left on everything in order to stay, part of the political conversation. So what they do is they begin cutting off people who are on the right who dissent, just as they were cutting off people earlier who were not anti-communist enough. I think the entire, what I call media conservatism today, is utterly corrupt. I think that it must be pushed aside and some new movement must be created if we want a serious right that will take on the left and fight leftist intolerance. Now, there are some people there, I'm sure, who are perfectly decent, who are simply sucked into the system. But it's a controlled conversation with too much gatekeeping. And they lie about the past all the time. And, we used to joke, at the end of the day, they agree with the leftist understanding of American history. We used to be racist, sexist, all these things, but we're okay now. We sort of got it right. So you have to support our side. Well, they pretty much accept the left's view of the American past, as far as I can see. And I think they have to move away from that habit. I think they also have to understand the United States is a constitutional republic. It is not a global democracy. It is not based on human rights. It is based on historical liberties that are embedded. And of course, most of them go back to England anyhow. that is the way we should understand it. But I think it may be too late for that. Too many bridges have been broken, or we've moved past them. So, and of course, our mother country, England, seems to be in even worse shape than we are.
Yeah, that's for sure.